we actually wanted to talk about this whole peaceful, violent protest thingy. I saw your panel with a bunch of people on this topic, and I watched it and messaged you about it as such. And yeah, so I thought that maybe I could, provide some kind of like inside info, considering I was actually a revolutionary, and there was actually a big, humongous protest and revolution that started peaceful, but then turned into pretty violent stuff at the end of it, or in the middle of it, I guess you could say. And yeah, so what overall is your like position on this whole thing? I understand it that you are not like against violence, but you think it's much more effective if protests are not violent, and if there is no like dire reason to escalate it to violence, then you probably shouldn't. Is that right?
Yeah, you need to be in a position where I think, one, you've got the moral high ground to use violence. That can either be that the state is like using very unjust violent action against citizens or something like that. And also you need to have the practical end that that this is going to achieve things where nonviolence can't, where nonviolence is just being either ignored or shunned or usually like responded to with violence. Yeah, so I think you need that. You need both. You need to have a moral high ground to do it, and you also need to have to show that it is more likely to lead you from like A to B, I think.
What would you say would be a good, like, justifiable reason for for protesters to turn to violence?
I think if the state is already using like very, very, if there's no other recourse, so if the institutional failure is at a point where you can't vote it away or you can't protest it away and like that's just being ignored, or if you are protesting peacefully and the response from the police is maybe not so much to arrest you but to shoot you, or I think if we're going to go with I think specific examples are easier because like just it's grounded in reality. Like if it's like South Africa where you're trying to be nonviolent but the government bans you, they start arresting your members and they start shooting peaceful protesters, and they start forcibly evicting hundreds of thousands of people because they're making certain neighborhoods too black. I think that's probably a good reason to start with like some level of violence. But even then, I think still some levels of violence are going to be like more permissible than others, right? Like I think it starts with like sabotage, and then you might have to escalate to like fighting with the police if you reach a certain point, although that's probably quite far off. And yeah,
Yeah,
so it
that's what
depends on the
happened pretty much,
circumstances.
in
Yeah,
Ukraine.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess people have actually asked like my opinion several times, I guess, because they expected me to be like yeah, like pro violence,
Mm.
because of the how the Maidan Revolution turned out, I guess, which I mean makes sense because it turned out to be quite brutal. But I actually am the opposite.
Hmm.
So they got confused because of that. Mostly because I do think that Maidan Revolution is that example you brought up. So when the state actively starts to kill protesters, and Yanukovych and his government at the time, as you know, decided to pass the laws that would completely prohibit any protests that are civil and peaceful in any way. So after that was, passed, things escalated pretty much heavily after 21st of January when this was passed. So yeah, so not only government was trying to stop us from protesting in the sense that they were allowed to arrest us, to use violence against us, like police and National Guard, things like that. So they were allowed, and they started to do it quite heavily. So after that, yeah, shit, started to become violent, but not before that. And it's something that many people don't talk about when they talk about Maidan Revolution. So it didn't start in January, right? It started in November, and there also was a month of December when there was, and almost entire January as well. So the violence really escalated since 19th of January. So before that, it was them, enacting some type of violence against us mostly. So Berkut, special forces, police. they pretty much, and titushki as well, which I don't know if people know here, but it's like basically thugs that were paid to attack protesters. Sounds weird, but it is what it is. Yeah, they were like gopniki basically. I don't know is the which is the equivalent in the English language, but it's like criminal, marginalized people like that. Also like I don't know, like the best word exactly to use other than tags, I guess.
Yeah.
So this is like what happened pretty much, and we people like were very like mad at you at the panel when you were like you should withstand violence and probably like getting beaten up, and it was not only your point, it was mostly a weak point. I think a weak's point, if I'm not mistaken, is his name. So I think it's actually correct. I mean, people got us mad at you for that, but for weak especially. But it's true, you really do need to get your ass beaten up, unfortunately, which is not fun by any stretch of the imagination, but that's what got most people on our side. So the majority of the public support started to up and they became on our side. Then after we were beaten up, and especially after in January on Hrushevskого Street was the major violence that killed 4 protesters and injured more than 1,000. So mind you that not a single policeman died in that clash. So they were injured, but we didn't kill any. So they died afterwards in February. 13 of them died of special forces people. Whereas on Maidan side, it was 108 people and thousands injured. Also, a lot of people missing, right? So so we didn't do anywhere near as much damage to them as they did to us. It's not even comparable. Not to mention the fact that out of those 13 Berkut people who were killed, pretty big chunk of them actually was not killed by the protesters directly. So they either caught on fire or were like trampled, so it's not like there was like heavy like shooting them in the face action, so it was like mostly like a casualties basically of the very heavy protests. So yeah, I'd say that I think the line is very like blurry, I guess you could say, like where the violence is justified, and it's hard to say exactly. But in our case, it was primarily after they started killing people. It's when shit went south, pretty much, and those laws, obviously.
Yeah. So I think just to recap, it's like so you're saying it started peaceful from November until about January 19th, and then January 19th there was the combination of the anti-protest laws, which basically, I think if anyone doesn't know, the anti-protest laws effectively gave not only cops but also just like other civilians the right to commit crimes against protesters, and they'd be let off for it. And also just banned protests like effectively all the way throughout. So
more than 5 people could not gather, shit like that. So you would get like crazy sentences to like 10 years or some shit like that for like violating. So which is kind of interesting. Then when they were passed in 21st of January officially, then basically like Berkut people would start to use violence hardcore as well. So on a regular, not just like some flashes that were before, but just this was the main tool now against the protesters. So this is when the barricading started, us getting like making ourselves shields, weapons, things like that started, and only after sorry, it's my mom. I got distracted a little bit. So basically that's what happened afterwards, not before. And it's a pretty significant, because if we started that, then that would be a completely different perception of us in public, I think. And I really believe that, because I saw people change their opinions about Maidan and becoming more supportive, more sympathetic towards us after they started killing us. That's sorry.
So when you're saying that it was peaceful before the protests and before the anti-protest laws, just to clarify, was it like, were you said you were getting attacked by those thug groups and by cops? Was that even before January 19th? I'm guessing you were getting attacked.
Yes, but it was not as bad. It was mostly like, some beaten ups maybe. They would attack journalists sometimes who were filming shit, and like activists, very like louder people, like who were like easy, more visible in protests. And they would sometimes use like gas shit, it's like that. But it wasn't like killing us, like shotguns and sniper shit and beating us to death. Exactly. So those
So
people died only on January 1920.
so was it like getting just absorbing attacks from police and from other groups? Was that like a conscious strategy? Did you decide that you were going to do that before you went out there, or was it just like you got attacked and you decided that you couldn't beat them, so you were just going to take it? Or how? I guess
It
how
was kind
strict
of
was the idea that you would just take the hits?
it was kind of combination, I'd say, of both. First of all, defending ourselves at first was very hard because police was not on our side. They were like the ones who were beating up. Again, for example, Titushki would attack us,
Mm-hmm.
and police would either join them or they will actually let them pass, and get to us. So that's that. For example, I personally witnessed a bunch of situations with my sister when we came to the police person and we said, this guy, like Titushki dude, has a gun, and he threatens people with this fucking gun. And he would do absolutely nothing or take the gun and then give it to them back, like straight in front of our faces. So it was very like hard to, when there was like mostly women and like elderly people and younger people who did not know how the fuck you fight like police and those like Titushki people with knives and, shit like that. So that's one thing. But then things change when more like aggressive people, I guess, started to participate in Maidan. Mostly it was ultras, which would be like football fans, who started to defend us from Titushki mostly at first, and then police as well. And right sector people, more aggressive, like nationalist types as well. Which thank fuck, because if it wasn't for them, then we wouldn't be able probably to, to continue standing there. So yeah, there's that. Also, there was like a conscious effort made not to aggress on them. There were certain agitators, certain unhinged people. Obviously, they, always are there, those people. And we did our best to try to restrain them, basically, to
Okay.
not let them. And also, we appealed to police all the time. I quite remember that. There's footage of that, and I remember that we would be, please, you don't have to be like on their side. Your oath is to the people, not to this government. You don't have to do like their criminal, bidding. And we would try to like literally stand in front of them, like on our knees, and ask them. And that was first months, obviously. Afterwards, it was a bit more at least less peaceful from our side, let's put like that. Yeah, but first few months we did try to appeal to them, to Berkut, to police, and to explain to them that they are going against, the people, and that's who they should be allegiant to, not to the, criminal government and tyranny. So it didn't work that well, to be honest, but but we did try at least, and it did give us a good look, I think, publicly.
Yeah.
So
And when January 19th happened and people started, you said, getting shields or being more like physical with the authorities, was that like, again, was that like a conscious decision, or did it just happen spontaneously and you had to go with it, or how did that work?
pretty much, some people who were more aggressive from the get-go, they kind of waited for it to happen, in a way, because they knew that it will escalate to this eventually, and they were right, to be honest. So there's that. So they were like waiting on that opportunity to hit back, basically, right? But there were several people who just were like, well, we have to do it. It was the majority of people actually who were like, well, if we don't start being more aggressive, then they will just push us out. We will not be able to stand here and together and to protest unless we defend ourselves. So barricades, shields, handmade weapons, shit like that need to be utilized, because otherwise we just don't stand a chance. They will just, remove us from here, which was not acceptable. At that point, the only solution was Yanukovych to, to get booted out of power. So this was the only acceptable thing for people at that point, and they knew that they had to defend themselves. and to be more aggressive if they want to achieve that. That's pretty much what happened. So most people made the decision to be more violent, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't actually know it went like that with like exactly in that way, but yeah, it makes sense. Like,
I mean, there were some people who were, like I said, agitators and aggressive from the get-go,
yeah.
obviously, right? There are always such people, but they were pretty much, people, how do you say that, shamed them for that at the start. So
Yeah.
most people like stopped doing that. I remember very clearly, especially like women, for example, which, not to make this gender, but that's just how it went, most, like a lot of like women on Maidan would be like, stop, don't like attack them. Women would appeal to the police mostly because they just wanted to, not to escalate to violence. Well, it was like a complicated thing. A lot of action was happening, obviously, from both sides, but definitely shit went south after the first killing happened. That was like the moment when you knew that it would not be the same, and it only got worse since then in February, because it was the day when most people died was like 19-20 February.
Yeah, I think that's quite common in just about all protests. I think is when there are people there who are like, "Yeah, let's fuck shit up" and all that. Like, yeah, most of the
Yeah.
crowd tends to turn on them very quickly, and it's very spontaneous. I think because so much of that violence discussion was about the civil rights movement. I think obviously what they did was they would have like workshops, and they would be very much like, yes, we are a non-violent movement. Like, we're gonna train people to be non-violent. We're gonna have workshops. We're gonna like make sure that everyone here can like take a blow from the cops and not hit back, and that would be the thing. And they would like make sure no one brought weapons and all that. So like, I guess what you guys did, was it like that kind of tight, or was it more just like a mutual understanding that came more naturally?
I'd say the second. It's more
Yeah.
like a mutual understanding. There were like activists who were very much like, we're peaceful, we're just protesting, sure. But quite a lot of activists were actually the more aggressive people, which I understand. They were like very invested, obviously, in this whole thing happening. But it was very like, I don't know, the spirit of it was just very non-aggressive, I guess, in the beginning. Then, when push how's that phrase, push came to shove or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, people like, did what they had to do, obviously, right? And more aggressive elements started to be not restricted by the majority, that's for sure. So because people like, fuck that shit, which I mean understandable in my opinion, because previously people were like, oh, chill out, to like right sector people, to like very aggressive people, but then they're like, fuck it up, dudes. Like, after they literally shooting at us with shotguns and throwing grenades at us, and people are getting killed left and right. For example, first person who was killed was Serhiy Negoyan. Negoyan was Armenian Ukrainian, a pretty young dude. He was like 22, I think, at the time, and he was shot 4 times. You know, in the
Yeah.
chest, in the stomach, in the head, and after that, it was people went a bit nuts after that. To be honest, it was a bit of blur what happened next, in my opinion. Yeah, but just overall it was just people did not back down. And also I remember like the public as well, right? I at first, for example, public was either indifferent to Maidan people efforts or kind of like aggressive about it, mostly. So people would be like, why the fuck are you doing that? Like, go home, why can't you just go do your job at work or some shit? And people would call us like homeless, like thugs, and things like that. So it was not fun, definitely. Like, I remember very clearly, I was standing quite far from the like center of the Maidan action, and literally a person went by and spat like straight at me, like in my face. It was not fun. It was very not fun, and I really wanted to, someone to teach this guy manners. Let's put it like that. But I didn't do anything. I didn't like it. Obviously, yes, I was sad about it. But people would, scream at us, call us names and shit like that. It was not fun. But then, as thing went on, and our image was very good, I think, because we were like very peaceful. People saw that footage of us appealing to cops. People saw us, explaining ourselves, playing music, poetry, doing like cultural shit. Let's put it like that. There, not
Yeah.
just some like writing stuff, right? And people like, oh, these guys are actually not like thugs. I told you this story like within DMs, but I had a friend who was very anti-Maidan at first, and he was like, oh, it's like stupid shit, like you just being paid basically. And I was like, well, no, I'm not being paid whatsoever to stand there, and I don't know anyone who is. And he was so convinced that people who only can go protest because of them of they're being given like money basically to do it, right? And he was like very apathetic, very like jaded, cynical, I guess you could say. And then after the violence escalated, he came to me. Actually, we had like a bunch of like conversations with him, and he came to me and he said like, no way in hell anybody's withstanding being shot, beaten up to a pulp for like 1,000 hryvnias, which is like our money, right? And he
Yeah.
understood that people were doing that because they thought it was the right thing to do. So he then came there and he saw everything with his own eyes. And it was a couple of weeks, and I already saw him chanting, Slava Ukraini and things like that. And it
Hmm.
was very, I don't know, like touching thing, I guess. And many people like that changed their minds. Like in the beginning, when I started participating, most of my like relatives, friends, older people especially, were very aggressive towards like Maidan, and thought we're doing some shitty, stupid stuff. That will only make things worse. Let's put it like that, right? And afterwards, like in after January and especially in February, those people who called us names, they were glued to their TVs, like crying because protesters were getting killed.
Hmm.
And that's a difference in public opinion, if I say so myself. And yeah, and I think this was done by us being non-violent at first, because if we were like very aggressive, blowing buildings up, putting stuff on like on fire and attacking cops, I don't think like even the half of those people who eventually started to support us would have. So yeah, that's my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I feel like it just rings true of so many different protest movements. So yeah, no, that's
Hmm.
not really that surprising to me. So I guess what you've confirmed is that you were wicking out at those protests. So
Well, yeah, I mean, it is hard. I understand. Like, for example, people like, what should we let ourselves be beaten up? Like, or will throw like a virtue signal and shit at you. Like, you just want to sacrifice like other people's bodies, to achieve goals and shit like that. But it is what it is, unfortunately. So most people are not pro violence and even not even pro protests, to be honest. So most people like just want
yeah,
to chill, live their life. They don't care that much, and they look at you like you're some crazy ass like motherfucker, and they're like, "What are you doing? Just go home like the rest of us, Wake up in the morning, go do your job, return home, and just shut the fuck up, right?" Most people don't like disturbance and don't like and are afraid also of the aggressive change, right? They think, "Oh, it will make things worse," which in a way you could say it did, because after that Crimea happened, after that Donbass happened. I
mm,
don't regret it. Let me be clear about that. But it did, change things, not for the better in some regards, and for the better in other regards, right? So yeah, so they were afraid of this change, and understandably so. But I think behaving like virtuous and with some grace, I guess, does make people take your side and become sympathetic towards you.
mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and it did happen in Ukraine, at least for sure, because like I said, from spitting things went to crying in front of TVs, and that's a big difference. And it did help us, because we get so many more people came to Maidan then, So what started, for example, like not only in Kiev, right, other cities as well. For example, in Kharkiv, it was pretty hard because it's very eastern, Russia sympathetic city at the time. So not anymore, thankfully, but at the time it was like that. So we had like a lot of people being very aggressive towards us, and eventually I saw a lot of those people there on the square. So yeah, and it's very hard to change anything meaningfully and have a confrontation with armed police and Berkut people if you're like 100 people, if you're 1,000 people, it's very hard to do anything. But if that's 10,000 people, then it's way easier. If it's 20,000, then at 200,000, and it became bigger, 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 and bigger, and then we had a chance because a lot of people supported us, not just like a bunch of radical. Can I say the R word?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
feisty retards. I told you. So we were the feisty retards at the beginning, and then other people decided to, join in. And it was not just a bunch of feisty retards. It was many, many less feisty people, but who also are very important because they supplied us with food, with like warm clothing. They became like kind of like a bulk of the movement because when it's 200,000 people standing there, it's quite hard to attack us, and it helped, obviously, right? And yeah, it was pretty weird time. I remember a very funny story that happened to me. I was wearing those like ribbons everywhere on me, like on my backpacks, on my arms, like blue and yellow with like Maidan symbols, with like European Union, like circle with stars, shit like that. So I was wearing that all the time to show my like support to Maidan and that I was, pro Maidan, obviously. And I had this like weird moment. I was going home and nobody was on the streets. It was like pretty cold and winter and stuff like that. And I saw three dudes who are very like gopnik looking. So like
Okay.
dressed in like fake Adidas clothing, that type of stuff. So they were like very thuggish, let's put it like that. Golden teeth and shit like that. So I saw them pointing fingers at me, like to each other, like look at this, person, and pointing fingers at me from a distance. And I was like, fuck. I thought they will, attack me. It happened before. And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, this exactly this. Yeah, so I was like, fuck, no way. This people like that usually are pro-Russian. No shade, but it is what it is, So
Okay.
and I was like, oh, fuck me. Those are like anti-Maidan vatniks, And I like prepared myself for at least them harassing me and assaulting me in some way. And I was quite small at the time as well. I was like, I'm not big now, but I was 19 and shit. So it was like pretty scary. And then they pass like right through me and they yell like at the top of their lungs, Slava Ukraini! And I was like,
Hmm.
fuck you. Literally was preparing to die at this moment. And I was like, Heroyam Slava, which is what you say in answer to Slava Ukraini, And they were like smiling with their golden tooth at me. And I was like, what a day, Gopniks are pro-Ukraine and pro-Maidan. It was a very funny moment. And I actually learned not to judge people that hard on their appearance after that,
Yeah.
because I made some heavy assumptions about these lads, and I was wrong. But I nearly shot myself, to be honest. So that was, they should have indicated sooner that they were not trying to kill me, in my opinion. But that's another story.
Hmm. That's a cute story.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we saw those shouting like gopniks on Maidan, and it was always like the cutest thing,
Yeah.
because you don't expect that stuff from this type of people. Also, there was like a very funny story that there were pictures of Maidan people in Kherson, I believe, in the city of Kherson,
Mhm.
and we started shitting on the people on those pictures because we thought they were anti-Maidan because they
Right.
looked like gopniks, And they're like, look at those orcs, look at those like ugly mugs. And then those people cite in the comments, it's a Maidan protest in Kherson. And we were like, fuck. No, guys, you look cute. You look just fine. You don't look like orcs and gopniks whatsoever. Yeah, we take it back. You are like very intelligent, borderline aristocracy looking guys. It's all good, So yeah, so that's your lesson, guys. If you think someone looks like a gopnik, they might actually be chill and cool. So yeah, but
Wow.
there so many sad emojis were there, and they were like, "We are Maidan protesters in here, so 1 HP, voices." I felt really bad for shitting on those guys. So yeah, that's the story basically of me appreciating gopniks.
Yeah. That's you and your journey away from prejudice.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, cool.
Also, it was quite easy to stop judging people like that because, I mean, I had like this pretty insane situation. For example, I was a bit more soy when I was 19. So
Yeah.
I was like a bit more of a leftoid, I guess you could say. So I was like more against the, right sector people, far right people, and like very like nationalist types. I'm not exactly like the biggest fan of them now, but I'm not as judgmental, let's put it like that, right? Mostly because they're fighting for my country,
Yeah.
First of all. Yeah, second of all, the rest of it is not as bad as I initially judged. But then I was like very much aggressively like anti those dudes on Maidan.
Hmm.
And there was this time, one of dudes I know, he was a right sector dude and ultra as well. So football fan, and I had beef with him. Like I would always shit on him and tell about his opinions on the, let's say, non-Ukrainians.
Hmm.
Let's put it in a nice way. Yeah, so and also about like women and LGBT stuff. I was very like aggressive because he was very aggressive about that. So one day happened a situation that this guy who I thought I called him names like subhuman shit, like very aggressive. So one of the days when we were attacked by titushki, pretty hardcore with knives and like gas and pistols and shit like that, and bats. So this guy who I shat on relentlessly, I was more aggressive towards him than he was to me. He just defended me, with his body basically. So he like hugged me, and they were beating him instead of me. So, change my opinions. Let's put it like that.
Wow.
Never shat on him once after that, because he literally like for some reason like defended me, although I didn't really deserve it, because I was shit to him, all the time.
Hmm.
And yeah, I remember the person still. I have not seen him like in a million years. Don't know if he's like alive or not, but it's just changed my view on that, on how to treat people, I guess. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good story. As always, thanks for affirming all my opinions with your stories about Ukraine. So yeah,
I mean, I was definitely on your side on that debate. Let's put like that.
nice
Not
one.
not gonna pretend otherwise, but it was just very cringe to see people like make such like statements about. I'm gonna make an assumptions. Not a single one of those people who were on another side of this panel has actually participated in any sort of revolution or protest. So it was, yeah, very weird to see them being so pro like violence, I guess, when there's no need for it. But yeah, that's pretty strange. Also, there seem to be firm believers in the fact that it's not possible to achieve change without violence, which I think is not exactly how it is in most circumstances. But
No,
whatever,
especially
right?
like if you're. It's also not to mention that Ukraine is a country that, at least pre 2014, was mired in corruption, and they basically you had like a president who was involved in stealing elections and who had already like had defied his own parliament and the will of his own people just to move in a direction opposite to what everyone in the country wanted, like with the Russia deal. So it's very
Mm.
different from America, where like people usually get what they vote for, right? And people have so many different ways that they can pressure their local governments or their states to do certain things or to stop doing other things. So it's like there are problems, but it's very, very different from what the case was in Ukraine, where like that kind of achieving recourse through the civil democratic process it's so much more available in most countries like America or the rest of Europe compared to Ukraine. So yeah, it's considering
Mm.
that as well.
I mean, I'm
It's just
I'm
so
like
weird that you would
exactly.
like jump to violence before you've tried anything like the 15 other things
Yeah,
that you can
that's
do first, right?
exactly that's what I pretty much thinking. I'm not like, judgmental when people, think that there's no other way than violence. So for example, when there's like active attempt to squash like the protesters physically, like it was, for example, in Ukraine, and the government attempts to pretty much establish a full-on tyranny, right? So to curb any other attempts to protest peacefully or even have elections in the future, like it was in Ukraine, right? So we're well on our way to become Belarus pretty much at that point. So I'd say that this is the time for violence for sure, because there's just no other way. And unless you want to live in like a totalitarian, authoritarian like hellscape, that's the only solution you can at that point utilize. But it doesn't seem to be the case like that in the United States, in my opinion, at least now. So yeah, so there's that. Also rioting, like what the fuck, like looting, stealing shit. I was at first, people would send me stuff in Ukraine when this BLM stuff was going on, right? And I was like, and they were like, look at these thugs, and I was like, hey guys, chill out. Like people called us thugs, So it's like a common tactic to like paint. For example, Russia did it to Maidan people, right? They
Yeah.
would call every one of them like junkies, thugs. They would paint us like as whatever, like radical, Nazi, Bandera, whatever the fuck shit, right? And they would also like smear us and call us like all sorts of names and paint us like as this violent movement when we were not at the time, right? So I'm not the one to buy this thing like quickly when the whole movement is painted as violent based of the actions of certain like groups there or certain people there. But so many videos, dude. Like so many stuff, like rioting and things like that. It was a lot. And for example, in Kiev, right? It's a big city, and it was in the center of the city as well, right? So not a single like luxury shop was looted. Like nothing was stolen from those like Dior, Chanel, fancy schmancy stores, right? There was like no damage, like that much property damage at all. Like one of the few buildings that was, torched was trade union building when where Maidan people were hiding, and it was torched by Berkut, mind you, not like Maidan people. So there were like couple buildings in half a year of a protest that were damaged, but that's about it. So there was no mass like rioting and stealing shit, because that was not why we were there. And not to say that BLM people are there to riot specifically, but many people seem to be using this as an opportunity to riot and to steal shit. And it's got to be condemned by protesters themselves, which doesn't seem to be happening that much. But whatever.
Yeah, I mean, even in like America's a much bigger country, obviously. So like most of the protests at BLM were peaceful, but it was really frustrating seeing that like when the violence happened, the social media response from the left was just like it was always like there was so much of either celebrating it and justifying it, or even just saying like or just being so unwilling to say it's bad. Like yeah, that was kind of irritating.
Yeah.
Because I
I
think
mean, obviously, like,
if the generic response was just to be like, yeah, we don't condone that. Like people at the protest generally try to stop that. It's a massive protest though. Like you can't be like 100% perfect. Sorry. Like that would have been so much better than what people actually did, was just like butchering Martin Luther King quotes, or just saying it's based, or saying like it doesn't really matter because these are like businesses and shit. Or they'll just get all covered by insurance, which
oh
doesn't
yeah, that
actually happen.
leftist shit.
Suddenly,
Yeah.
if you're like on the left, and like we suddenly have trust in insurance companies covering everything, which they absolutely didn't. Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, they kind of butchered their own fucking reputation, because as far as I know, most of it was indeed peaceful, like 90 something percent, like was BLM stuff was protesting, peaceful protesting, was not rioting and burning and torching shit, right? But when you don't condemn and you don't distance yourself, let's say, from like rioting and aggressive action when it's not needed, then well, you're like painting your whole movement in a very bad light, because it seems like you're okay with that shit, right? And people who are already like on the fence about protesting, they will be even more against your movement, because they already are like kind of like, why do we need this shit, right? People are always like that. The majority of the population will never be like active revolutionaries or active protesters, right? It just doesn't happen. But they will never take your side if you let's say don't distance yourself from things that they fear, and they're, let's say, their assumptions about most protesters are like, let's say, they're thugs, right? And then they see footage of actual like thuggy actions, let's put it like that, rioting and shit like that, and other people don't condemn it or even try to excuse it, and they think, oh, that's what I thought, that's what that's what I thought you guys were up to, looting and stealing shit, instead of political change and like movements like that. So I think they kind of like shot themselves in the foot a bit, I think.
It's
Yeah.
especially the case when you don't really know what you want as well. Like BLM did have some demands, I think, but they were they're often quite opaque compared to Maidan, which was
Mm.
quite clear. Like get rid of Yanukovych, go with the EU deal over Russia. Yeah, that's a problem as well. Anyway, do you have anything else for the stream?
Pretty much, I think that's about it. I mean,
Cool.
I can just sit here and agree with you, but
Yeah,
that would not be very fun, I think, for people. But you mean you like my feisty retards comment, so there's that.
that's true. Yeah, that was really
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries there. Whoa. Okay. Um, yeah.
Oh, I
What?
mean, what do you suggest I use instead of the R word? Because people seem to be very offended by it.
I tried to stop. I made a good effort to stop saying it for like 10 years, and then I just
And then
realized
you
I
give
don't
up?
know why I gave up. Yeah. Because the same
Oh,
people,
so you
because I noticed in my own Discord that the people who get annoyed at me saying retard were like, it was always people who are also upset when I say schizo or crazy or
oh
batshit. And
Jesus.
I'm like, okay, fuck
What can
off.
you
Like,
say
yeah.
then?
Yeah, then at that point you can't say anything. Like, I don't know. It's I understand why it's there's a bit of a there's a kind of there's a kind of no man's land like for that word. It's not really decided by the majority whether or not it's a slur or just like one of those kind of
Mm-hmm.
rebranded like other words, because idiot and imbecile used to mean basically the same thing as well. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I don't use it like habitually, but I care less these days.
I see. Well, I thought you would be more soy about it, but apparently,
Listen, I'm
you're
I'm
not.
slightly soy about it, but you gotta
Well,
you
I
gotta live a
mean,
little.
I could say brain dead or like maybe like a fuckwit or like
Mm-hmm.
dimwit or some shit like that. Pretty much same, I guess, vibe to it. But yeah, but to me it's all funny, honestly, because you can probably imagine what we say here.
Yeah.
So it's really, I mean, to me that's I do try to appease like very soft-hearted fellow like human beings in the West, but yeah, but overall, if people find it offensive and they don't want me to say it, then I probably will, don't say it with
Yeah,
them there, obviously, right? But yeah.
I've kind of noticed that because I know a few Eastern Europeans in the UK, and even the ones who describe themselves as like left or far left talk like you would expect a right winger in the UK to talk, like when it comes to slurs
Mm.
or like vulgarity. So yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah, there's a cultural difference.
Well, yeah, I guess, but I mean, we in this like part of the world, people just are super hardcore on like swearing and shit. So it's very let's put it like that, super aggressive comparatively to the West, it seems. In
Hmm.
in even like other European like countries, it seems. So I guess like Ukraine, Russia, and all those countries are kind of like famous for being like a potty mouth,
Yeah.
as you say. Yes, so that's true. I mean, I will not. Well, I will try to. I mean, maybe use it a bit less or something. Like there is a thing that I don't use,
Do you
it makes
do
me
you get
soy, I guess.
pushback for that or?
Um, I mean, people call me like racist, the Nazi, and ableist. I didn't even know what the fuck that was until recently. But yeah, So, I mean, whatever, right? I think they will do it regardless if I say a retard or not, honestly. So yeah,
I think it's
they
the
would just
least of
find
your
a way.
the ableism's the least of your problems. Then it seems.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many isms. I'm like learning new ism every day. So yeah, be easy on me, guys, I guess.
All right. Well,
Hmm.
as you know, you're allowed to jump on whenever you like if you have any more stories
Thank
for us.
you.
But yes.
Yeah, super appreciated. And oh, by the way, that person I said that came to Maidan, he was thinking that everything was like for the money, and then he started to participate. And my friend, and that was actually pretty interesting when I saw him like jumping up and down, screaming like "Slava Ukraini," and I was a bit shocked by that. But even more so, guys, he actually went to enlist back in 2014 even. So
Okay. Wow.
so he became kind of from a nihilist, jaded, not believing in anything dude. He actually found himself some, I guess, faith in fellow human beings in Maidan. So that happened, I guess. And he was like the most like unpleasant, like cynical dude. He was like very different, and this experience of being around people, I guess, and fighting for a common goal and believing in something really changed him a lot, I think. So yeah, there's that dude.
Cool.
And do that. Yeah. Well, anyhow, very nice to hop on as usual, and yeah, cute shirt you have, by the way.
It's a
It's like
jumper
pink,
actually,
blue,
but
and
okay.
yeah, like a
It's
jumpsuit,
a
or how the
hoodie.
fuck it's called. It's a hoodie. Oh, hoodie. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I'm just but a barbarian. I
Hmm.
don't know how everything is called.
It's okay, one Western vocabulary piece at a time, eh?
Yeah. Well, bye bye. Guys in the chat as well. Bye bye. I guess. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for coming on.
How do you disconnect? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
I can
I'm trying to
disconnect you if you
disconnect.
want. Hang on.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, I did it.
All right. Okay.